first item of business, is there any staff communications?
Yeah, there's a few items I'd like to bring up. One being the most noticeable. Board Chair Sade is out this evening, so Board Member Blaney is a voting member tonight. One of the items on the agenda, item 3, which is 38 Upper Fremont, you'll find on the dais a request for a continuance. The applicant has requested that without any other backing explanation, so that is something we'll need to work on as well. I wanted to give you an update on some recent City Council approvals, both BioMarin Whistle Stop project at the 999 3rd Street and also the 350 Marydale. That's the 45-unit multifamily project out there on Redwood Highway in Marydale. That also got approved recently. On our next DRB meeting, which is our second Wednesday, remember we have 4 of them this year. February 19th, currently we have two returning items. One is the 104 Shaver project, Shaver Street, which is the new 7-unit apartment building. And also the one you just saw 2 weeks ago, the 7 Bellevue. They're anxious to get back and show you what they've amended their project with. So that concludes staff's communications tonight.
Just out of curiosity, when an applicant requests continuous, who gives the approval for the request? You do?
Yeah, we'll need to make a quick vote, and then I'm hoping you'll approve it, and then
so we do it.
You do.
So you said that meeting's on February 19th, which is a Wednesday?
It is Wednesday. It is, once again, we have 4 Wednesday meetings this year. We've already had one. We'll have another one on the 19th. And then the other 2 aren't till the end of the year, till around October or so, November, October. So you'll have 6 months of just Tuesdays.
It's likely I'll miss that meeting, but I'll let you know.
That's fine. Yeah, done. Yes.
Extended for 2 weeks or indefinite?
Indefinite.
So that was it? Any board communications?
Yeah.
Yeah, you had.
Yeah, I have a couple. First one is the Infinity used cars where they pulled out some of their landscape and they were parking cars where the landscape used to be.
Yes, I remember.
I think about a year ago, I saw a plan from Corone. I think she was in charge of that project, and
Yeah.
I haven't seen anything since then, and nothing's been done.
So you're looking for maybe an update?
Yes. And then the other one is there's 2 new houses at the end of Gold Hill Grade. I'm
Yes.
not sure what their addresses are. I think one's still under construction. It looks like it's just been primed, but it's really white. But the one slightly further down the hill, the new one, looks pretty light. And I'm not sure was one of the approved colors.
Okay.
If you could look into that.
So
that'd
look
be
under
great.
51 and 61. Got it.
Great, thanks.
You got it.
That it?
That's it.
Any other board communications? Seeing none, then we'll go to the consent calendar, which is approval of the minutes of January 22nd, 2020. Are there any corrections to the minutes?
The only thing I see, even though I was absent, is at the end it says Samina is the vice chair when I think she's the chair.
Yes. She was moved to the chair. So we should make that note.
Okay.
Any other corrections?
So I move we approve the minutes as corrected.
Is there a second?
Second?
Any further discussion? Nope. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The minutes are approved.
Abstain.
I don't think we have any old business. So we'll go to the first item, new business. Number 2 is the Windward Way Light Industrial Development. This is a request for conceptual design review to merge 3 parcels and develop two one-story light industrial buildings. Could we have a report from the staff?
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Crystal Rizzi, and I'm here on behalf of the Planning Department to present the project before you tonight. As mentioned, it's conceptual design review for a new light industrial development on 3 vacant lots. I'll begin my presentation by providing a background of the project site, followed by a brief description of the project, including an overview of the proposed site plan, site constraints, floor plans, and the overall design of the project. And I'll conclude with some specific areas where staff is seeking feedback from the board. The project site is located on Windward Way, just south of Bellum Boulevard, and consists of 3 vacant legal lots. These lots will be merged as part of the formal planning entitlement process. Surrounding uses include commercial uses to the north, offices to the south and the west, and vacant lots across Windward Way to the east. The project site has a general plan designation of light industrial/office. Some design-related policies identified in the general plan call for preservation of existing neighborhoods. The site is located within the Canal neighborhood and is primarily surrounded by other light industrial and office buildings. The general plan also recognizes the economic importance of industrial areas and seeks to design them in ways that creates a visually and comfortable and welcoming appearance. The general plan also identifies the importance of parking lot landscaping to control heat buildup, reduce air pollution, and soften the overall appearance of large parking lots. The project site has a zoning designation that's also light industrial/office. Overall, the project has been reviewed for consistency with standards of the LIO district, where the project is inconsistent with certain requirements as identified in the staff report. The applicant is going to be required to revise those project-specific requirements, but we didn't find anything that would significantly alter the design. It's mostly just the loading requirement, and we need some detail on the refuse areas, how those are going to be screened, what they're going to look like. This is the site plan. The project proposes construction of 2 one-story buildings, Building A to the north and Building B to the south. Also, as you can see on this colored site plan, the project proposes landscaping throughout, including along the Windward Way frontage, throughout the parking lot, and on the adjacent property lines. This slide is basically just showing some site constraints and easements that exist on the site, including a 30-foot wide shade zone, which is intended to protect the community garden that's adjoining the lot. There's also a 25-foot building setback requirement, as well as some easements, including a sanitary sewer easement, a PG&E easement, and a tower easement. Building A is located at the northern portion of the site and is approximately 19,770 square feet. It includes 6 tenant suites ranging from 2,180 to 4,580 square feet. At this time, no tenants or uses are proposed on the site. The east and west elevations of Building A are articulated with features that create visual interest, including steel roll-up doors at the west elevation, as well as angled roof elements at the east elevation. These serve to break up the horizontal massing and create a pedestrian scale entry at that location. The north and south elevations also provide articulating features which provide visual interest, including horizontal and vertical siding, some more steel roll-up doors, and angled roof elements. And also you can see here at the south elevation that angled roof element and how it shows the pedestrian scale. Building B is approximately 12,355 square feet and is comprised of 2 tenant suites. One is 3,600 square feet and the other is 8,500 square feet. And again, no tenants or uses are proposed at this time. The east elevation shown here on Building B provides articulation similar to that of Building A with the steel roll-up doors and the pedestrian scale entries. But as you can see, the west elevation lacks any real defining architectural features. And similarly here, the north and south elevations are not clearly articulated. However, as noted in the staff report, the Building B is set back a little bit further from the right-of-way than Building A, which may warrant the limited articulation as compared with Building A. So staff is seeking the board's recommendation on the architectural design of the site as a whole. Proposed materials for the two buildings include vertical and horizontal metal panels and concrete blocks and columns. The majority of both buildings are in kind of a light beige color, and you can see that here on the colored elevations as well as the color materials board. Accent colors include the roof overhangs, which are kind of a redwood colored siding, and pre-finished steel trims along the roof parapet. As this project is for conceptual design review, again, staff is seeking the board's recommendation on the proposed design. Recommendations provided will be the basis for the applicant to submit a formal application, which will then come back to the board for recommendation to the Planning Commission. Specifically, staff is seeking feedback on these items listed here, including consistency of the project with the design-related policies and guidelines, the context of the proposed building with the surrounding development, the use of the colors and materials, the site plan given the lot constraints identified and the existing easements, and lastly, the adequacy of the location and proportion of landscaping. And that concludes my presentation.
Does the board have any questions of the staff?
The site plan that you showed there, is that something you came up with?
No, the applicant provided it after, I'm sorry, you're talking about this one?
That plan there.
Yeah, that's from the applicant.
Are those all existing trees?
I don't believe so, but we can have the applicant confirm that.
And the zoning of the large parcel to, on the other side of Windward to the east is, in our general plan, seen as a housing site?
Yeah, the MR2 zoned site.
So apartments, condos, multifamily residential,
Yeah, higher density.
higher density. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I had a question. The shade zone for the community garden, is that so they don't plant trees there?
No, it's because there's a community garden just on the other side of that, and I think they're trying to respect not shading it so that whatever they're growing.
Not put a building there?
Exactly, yeah.
But they could put trees there if they wanted. I mean, that would shade it, the garden too, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that's a good question. We can ask the applicant about. I'm not sure if that's an actual identified that they can't plant there, or if they are just kind of doing it out of respect for that garden.
Is the project applicant here? Like to make a brief presentation?
Make it brief. Thank you. My name is Patrick Cousins, Frederick Devine Associates Architects, and I want to talk briefly about how we ended up with this site plan and the buildings and the position, the size they are. And a lot of it has to do with this plan here, the constraints map. You were just talking a moment ago about this zone here. I created that as myself, out of respect for the garden, so I could get up here and say, that's why I didn't stick the building right up against that property line and put parking there. Your next question was about landscaping, and so I was going to come back to you and ask about trees. In the PG&E easement, which runs all the way through here and basically limits us to parking and landscape uses out there, they limit tree size to 15 feet. They don't want anything bigger than that. And we could certainly do something like this there that would be consistent, and probably if we held them in these finger plantings out toward the front, maybe you wouldn't throw much shade on the public garden. So that's why we have parking in this position. We have a sewer easement here with a live sewer line in it, so that's why this opening was created. This side of the site is heavily constrained by easements. So for that reason, the parking was put in front. Whereas on this side, we had the room to put the majority of our roll-up doors for these light industrial suites in the back, so you didn't see them, and put the public pedestrian entrances out front And then on this side, we kept them so they're visible, so the site, as you approach it, kind of makes sense. Oh, here's the entrances to those. Here's the entrance to these, parking adjacent there. This site over here, because of how much of it is constrained by easements and the fact that we don't want to do any filling at all around this tower, we held grades down in here, and that lends itself to having a truck dock. So this building is better suited to have large tenants. It shows 2, but it could even be 1 with a truck dock. The rear of this is constrained by, this is kind of a remnant swale that has no outlet, and it's packed with trees like eucalyptus that have been in there. But when this site was a property of San Rafael Sanitation District, there was these channels for drainage as they filled all this area out here all over the place, and this is just something that's left over. It doesn't take any water from paved areas or anything and has no outlet. So this is more suited for multi-tenant. This is a 1 or 2 tenant building. Kind of explains how we tried to make an effort to make these pedestrian scale entrances. This is the one for this site. We have, I think in the staff report it mentioned that there was no calculation for the amount of landscaping there would be, and the actual number is, I think there's about 22,000 required, and we're providing 29. So there's not a problem there with how much available land we have to landscape. There was a question about these trees along here. That's just sighted off aerial photographs, existing trees. The rest of the landscape needs to be, developed and will be for a formal design review, but we're not allowed to berm in this area, so we'd be screening all this parking with landscaping. This is the only landscaping that's directly related to the street, and we would provide a lot of screening for that. Along the property line, this should all be fairly easy to screen, and the same back here. There's an easement all along here on the other property, and their side is landscaped, and in combination with what we'll do, this will be very well screened. And then this area is heavily, trees. This is the side that's not articulated very well, but there's no plan to remove these except to prune them to allow building. You've seen the elevations and the materials. We'd like to hear your comments on them. Tried to make, these are industrial buildings, but we've worked on doing articulation to them. If there's any questions about them, I can answer those. And with that, I guess I would turn it over to you for your comments. There was one question about fencing. I'm sorry. There is a plan to fence this entire backside of this property. No fencing in front. It's already fenced now, and it would continue to be fenced. This side is fenced already. This side is fenced. And this is permanent fencing that's there now, as well as this side. This is only temporary fencing and would be removed. Okay?
Any questions of the?
I had one quick question. Are any trees to be removed?
The plan would be to just prune them for health and for, appearance.
But there's nothing where the buildings are.
There are some large branches that extend out this way.
No, but I mean physical trees within the building
physical
envelope.
trees in there, no.
Okay.
Yeah, and this swale only a portion of it is on our site. There's much more on this side, so it's not like we could remove it, you know, there'd be part of a swell with a retaining wall or something if we did that to it.
Any other
I have a couple.
questions? Oh,
I
I
saw-
have a couple of questions.
Sarah,
Oh,
first.
sorry.
Sorry. I saw a photo of a material board. Do we have that material board here to review?
I forgot to bring it down, but I can run up and grab it if that's helpful.
That would be.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Jeff?
Jeff?
Yeah, I have a couple. So you're gonna increase the base, I guess, the BFE to 11?
Yes.
Is it currently like 8.5 or something like that? So you'd be bringing the site up, whole site up about 1.5 feet? Is that,
Yeah,
Right. seeing that right?
it varies from, you know, like 7.5 up to 9. So it would take, and the foundation design that goes with this proposal would be to have deep foundations that we didn't have to add extra fill and to allow it to settle out. So we've got it as low as you could have it, with 1 foot above base flood elevation.
So the grading plan, final grading plan is to bring the site up like 1.5 to 1 foot and then maybe just taper down at the property edges?
Yeah, it's more than that.
No,
It-
7.5 to 11. It's 4.5 feet.
Yeah.
Right.
It's considerable.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
yeah. So it'd all be coming up that much and just
Because they just raised the base flood elevation a foot a year or two ago. And so it's, that site has sat there like that. It's probably gone up 2 or 3 times since it's been sitting there.
So you're going to construct a slab that is at BDE. You're going to construct a slab that's at 11.
It's not going to move. And then
And
we're gonna
hopefully
do-
they don't adjust BFE on you.
Yeah. And then they're going to go with balanced fill to not add any weight to the rest of the site, to minimize settlement. But there's still settlement over the next 50 years. You know, it's probably go down 12 to 15 inches.
So that's for the buildings. I didn't, I don't think we have it defined here. Obviously, the buildings by law are going to have to get up that tall. Are we going to bring the parking lot up as well, or so you're just going to bring the whole site up, or are we going to have?
Well, because of
I think.
ADA access and
I-
having
I
vehicle
believe so,
doors,
yeah.
you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
So-
you're going to have some retainage around the perimeter of this site to be able to fill.
Exactly.
Okay.
So there'll be, around the perimeter, there'll be, say, 2-foot retaining walls at the end of all this, abutting the landscaping. And the grading will account for settlement, and settlement will be a maintenance issue, just like it is for any property around here.
Yeah,
It
seeing
is
how
on-
this is conceptual review and you're just
Yeah.
sticking your toe in the water, obviously we'll need to have a civil engineering grade, a preliminary grading and drainage plan when you come in here to know what's going on with this site, so.
Yeah. But we have had a complete soils report, and the city's requiring that we have peer review of it, and it's going to be studied about as thoroughly as you could study a site.
Yeah, and it'd be nice when you come back with your formal application, maybe have a couple of sections through the site so we can kind of see
Definitely.
what's going on.
Yeah, we'll do that.
Any other questions of the?
Yeah, I have one more. Can we have the site map back up? That was the one, the colored one with the green and, that one.
Yeah.
So are all the dark green areas, is that all bioretention?
Yes.
And,
Those are reflected on the other plans that are included, the preliminary grading and drainage plan.
right, and can those, how flexible are those? Can they be combined and moved around and, I mean, you have
I
some
think-
areas there where, there's like a little bit scattered all over the place. Can some of those become bigger and have fewer of them, for example?
Well, I think part of the issue is draining away from the building puts water around the perimeter that they have to move around. So they got a pipe to these, but these they can drain to immediately. I think they have flexibility, sure.
Right. I mean, the reason why I'm asking this is the plants you're going to use in those areas are going to be totally different than all the rest of the landscaping. So you're going to have these kind of different pockets all over the place. So if they can be moved around or combined, and some of them go away, and I think that'd be, you know, a little bit more interesting landscape.
Yeah, I could see where right along here, if you
That could be
want to
bigger.
put trees in, you know, having them there is a constraint that against certain types of landscaping you'd want to use, sure.
Right, and there's some areas on the backside of the property where there's small retention, bioretention areas, if those could be made larger and others made small. Anyway, we'll talk about that in comments. But
Okay.
so is there some flexibility on those, do you think?
I believe so, but you can see there's quite a bit of square footage of bioretention required for this
Right.
site. We tried to keep them out front because this is the biggest area we have. I still got to run these by, specifically by PG&E. I think they're allowed because they're not ponds. They're not holding standing water. If they were, they wouldn't allow them in there.
Okay.
But they
thanks.
haven't specifically in their easement descriptions ruled them in or ruled them out.
So that, I guess that's my other question. So in the PG&E easement there, is there already underground stuff there that you're trying to avoid? Because you said there's a 15-foot tree limit.
No, it's the overhead. This is all for overhead high transmission lines. So there's a tower right here.
Right.
And it's just for access. Or because this is in a fill zone, not influencing the foundations of their towers.
But all the lines are on the other side of the street. There's just a tower on the property. So is there future lines on your side?
High transmission lines?
Yeah. Aren't they all on the other side
No.
of the street?
There's a row of transmission lines on
Right.
this side.
And then there's a one tower.
One's right there. That's a tower with transmission lines on it. Goes right through here, like that.
Right,
And
but
then
the trees
easement-
on your property, though, wouldn't be underneath the lines, I don't think, from my site visit. Do
That
we
tower
have a
right there-
picture of that site at all?
That tower right there has lines on it.
Right,
Yeah.
but only there,
Yeah.
but not the entire length of Windward.
No, the lines run just like this. So then the easement area for that is another 25 feet.
Do we
So
have a
that's the whole zone. You can't even,
Do we have a photograph of that area? Because my memory of being out there, the lines were across the street, but that you had one tower on
yeah,
the property you're designing.
right. There's another tower.
Right,
there.
they're on the other side of the street.
There's one tower right there and one tower right here.
Right.
And two rows of lines.
Does it show on this? It's hard to see.
In my memory, the lines were here with the tower here that came across the street.
Well, it's just something you can comment on
Okay.
and just be aware of that, so. Any other questions of the applicant?
I have one more question. Can you go through your color scheme a little bit? In looking at the elevations, I can't locate the walnut. Where are you proposing this one versus the
That is
granite stone?
the, okay, that's going right here.
Okay,
And then, so these are insulated panels that, you know, have 24 gauge steel on either side and that text coat on it. It's like stucco. And then these are on the surface of that, furred out like 6 inches. So this is like metal siding. It's a box rib design. Just so there's a shadow line, there's some different colors, some stuff going on.
where does this sit in relation to the CMU block at the base? Is it out, like, is it inboard or sticking out? If you look at that horizontal?
The CMU will be flush with these panels. This will be out 6 inches.
Okay,
And then these are regular roof overhangs, which are a standing rib design in this color. And then the CMU will also be these columns here that hold those up, right here and in that view also. And then the colors would be consistent between the doors and those. And we'd have some pre-coated steel cornice made up to go on top of the building.
And that matches this color?
Yeah.
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 Okay, thank you.
I really have no problem at all with the colors or the building or the site plan. Obviously, there's more information we're going to need, but at this point, I really don't have anything. I would like to applaud the applicant that bringing a project to us that actually meets the parking code.
Thank you, Don. Sarah?
Yeah, I think my comments will focus on the elevations. When you described the color scheme, I think all of the doors are this color except this one kind of door on the upper building A elevation that's to the fire control room. So I think consider making that consistent with the rest of the doors. Yeah. And then I think in terms of the entry scale and bringing it down to the pedestrian level, I think the nod is definitely there with the roofs, but it seems like there might be a missed opportunity with the spacing of the mullions at the glazing. It kind of gets articulated above anyone's head that would notice it to a smaller scale. So I think consider bringing some of that down to where people might actually interact with it would add to that pedestrian scaling. And then I'm not a huge fan of the beige, but I think in this context I won't say too much about it. I am a little worried based on the color board that the base color looks like a lighter value than the granite stone siding, and it doesn't seem like that's the intention. So if we had an actual sample, we could verify, but I think the way the elevations look is, at least for me, preferred versus the lighter on the bottom.
So that shape, not that one, is the sample?
Yeah. Let's see. I think when I first looked at these, the kind of the bump outs on the top, I couldn't quite understand what those were because they look identical to the roll-up doors. So I think it's good to break down the scale. I guess that was just something that kind of struck me. I won't say too much about it. And then in terms of the siding, the other thing I noticed was the handicap spaces are spaced nicely at each entrance. So I think that's a well-done feature. And then the siding seems extremely constrained, so I think you've done a lot with the project to kind of nestle it back. I agree with Jeff's comment. It would be nice to have an elevation or a section from the street to see how the building would be perceived, if there is kind of a mound going up. Because in looking at the site plan, the ramps that would take a pedestrian up may need to be broken with some landscape buffer between the two kind of rows, so that they don't feel so powerful on that road. Yeah. So I think just something to develop as you move forward. Okay. That's it for me.
Yeah, I agree with Sarah's comments on the building, and I basically like the building. I think you did a good job, and I think the site's well organized. My comments are more on the landscape. Well, of course, we don't have a plan yet, but for the future plan, when I was out there, I really thought the wires were on the other side of the street, and you only had the one tower on your side. So I'm a little confused on why they would limit the height of the trees. And with the future housing across the street, I think some trees to this project are pretty important. And I usually don't think of 15 feet as much of a tree. So it'd be nice to see they were larger. But your other constraint is when you have all those biobarriers or bioretention out there, the soils that you use in those also limit the size of the trees. So if those could be moved closer to the parking and you'd leave, an area between the bioretention and the street for potentially larger trees would be good. And if you can combine some of them and just shrink a few of them in front. Because the landscaping and the retention areas are going to be look radically different from conventional landscaping. So if they're not right in, the main areas between the buildings and the street quite so much, I think that would be an improvement. And, yeah, that's it for me. And then, a couple sections through the site would be nice to see.
Stuart?
Thank you. Yeah, Jeff stole my thumb there, but I'm right in there with him. I know it's not our job to design for what might be someday, but, if there's an opportunity to get some little bit of more meaningful landscape screening along the windward elevation, knowing that we're going to have a completely different use across the way in the future, it'd be nice to see something to just break it up a little bit. I would pay attention to, on that note also, just when you come back, just have an answer to how the site lighting might work, especially the parking lot lighting, any lighting on the building that might be casting off-site impacts, just knowing that there is that use across the way coming in the future. It appeared, yeah, it appears that lands of universal portfolio, and it says the same thing across the street. So I don't know, you guys, your client might own the parcel across the street from what I'm reading on the survey. So they won't complain. Absolutely. Yeah, this is a conceptual review. It's a little less formal. If you want to,
It's okay with me.
to the chair, if the chair is okay with
I think it'd
it.
be helpful if you answer.
Yeah,
the
it'll be
question.
anything that helps you.
Yeah, you gotta stand.
Yeah, we're here to help you tonight.
I'm sure you noticed those parcels have a temporary use on them right now.
Okay.
Yes.
They're parking
Cars.
for Toyota, and they spent considerable money putting in lighting and fencing and landscaping. And
Okay.
I don't know what the future of housing is there, to tell you
That
the
temporary
truth.
use is going to last a long time, probably.
But it's zoned that way, so I really can't comment.
Got it.
But
And-
I know that site has been heavily looked at by nonprofits and rejected for one reason or another,
Mhm.
because I work with a lot of those same nonprofits. But anyway,
Fair enough. And then along with Sarah, I'm sort of over beige buildings. So I mean, if you came in with a completely different color scheme, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing
Yeah.
an alternative personally. So I mean,
we had to come in with something,
right.
and I'm not married to these colors.
So if you want to go completely rogue, that's okay with me.
Okay.
Gray is good too.
Yeah, grays, something.
good, too.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot of beige buildings around.
They have some nice grays.
Absolutely. Other than that, I agree, just, parking lot lighting, the landscaping. I know in the past, looking at your parking, we've introduced a few more finger islands in the past. Have always been asked for to just kind of break up a row of 10 or 12 cars, so that's something you could consider. But, you've got it parking, so
I got one space to spare.
one space to spare.
Just point where you want it.
Somewhere in the front, but you have an easement problem, so
Okay.
there you go. But otherwise, I think you're on the right track. This is far more than we get on a lot of conceptual reviews, so thank you I hope you're getting some reasonable comments here.
Good, thank you.
Thanks.
That's it?
It's you.
Well, I've got to disagree with my colleagues on this one. As far as the architecture goes, I'm a little disappointed. I think that there's some missed opportunities here. And I'm particularly concerned that even in the future, this building is going to be there for quite some time. And even if right now it's not presently looked on as a potential residential site, given the fact that it's zoned residential, someday there's going to be some residential there, I would assume. So therefore, if I was living there, I'd like to look at a little more attractive building across the street. And I think you've got an opportunity. Industrial buildings can be very attractive. We've got a lot of attractive industrial buildings in San Rafael, so I'd encourage you to be a little more playful with both the color scheme and also the articulation of the building. Those dark gray panels will stick out 6 inches or so. Maybe they could stick out a little further, give you a little of a shadow line for one. They could also perhaps stick up above the roof and play a little bit with the roof line, just in that one little spot for a facade, but it'll make a difference. I'd also like to see, if it's possible, to somehow articulate some of the divisions of the tenant spaces a little better, so it doesn't just look like one big building. And then, I think my biggest criticism, or suggestion, is that you get a better sense of entry on these little shed roofs, porticos, but they seem to be weak. You have a big brawny building, an industrial building, and it seems like they could be weaker. I was out there today, and I was looking at the end, the cul-de-sac. There's that sfgate.com building that's got these really big, massive portals for the entry. You know, that's something that maybe you could think about relating to, just to give it a little more life and animation, because otherwise it's pretty much a simple steel building, the so-called decorated shed, where you have a box and then you put a couple of things on it. So I'd like to see a little more articulation, both vertically in the facade elements that stick up above the roof, and maybe a little more horizontal displacement of whatever these boxes are that pop out, and at the same time work on the entries a little bit more, and then have more fun with the color scheme, because like I say, you know, it's you're kind of off in a no man's land right now, where not many people will see it until the residential site gets built. But I think you have an opportunity. I think you have a lot of opportunities to be a little more playful with it, and it doesn't cost anymore. So those are my comments. Do we have any? We don't need a consensus or anything like
And
that,
this
do
will go to commission ultimately?
It will be. It'll go to back to the board for formal, and then the commission.
Maybe we should.
You're
Mark,
welcome.
would you like to say anything? I'm sorry.
It's early, but it looks like, I don't know, looks like a decent building. It's tough with those wires. I was kind of thinking the same thing, that it looks like there might be more space for a couple more trees on that front of the street. Look forward to seeing it later.
Would the chair like to ask the applicant if he has any questions regarding some of the comments he heard tonight?
Yes, the chair would ask the applicant, do you have any questions about our comments? Any clarification necessary? If there is, please step up to the mic.
Well, first, thank you all. And I'll, as you design something, you have the same reservations about, am I doing enough of them? And we'll go back and take a hard look at things. I did miss one thing, is there was some comment about large truck parking that was required on site, but we actually have 2 spaces, and I can point out where they are. So that was already comment from DPW. And we'll take care of that, and we'll be back with a better project. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The next item of business is 38 Upper Fremont, and the applicant has requested a continuation. Do we need to vote on that, Steve, or?
Yes, we should. We should, it's a request. It's been agendaed, it's been noticed. We should act on it. If you wish to grant the continuance, then we should act on it. And if
All right, well, then the applicant has asked for a continuance. Is there any comments about that continuance? Or does someone want to make a motion to continue this item? To a date uncertain, I guess, right?
I will move that we, per the request of the applicant, continue the item to a date uncertain.
Second?
Second.
Sarah seconds it. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. We'll continue the item to a date uncertain.
Thank you.
Then we'll go on to item number 4 of new business, which is 575, 595 Francisco Boulevard East. The Marin Subaru dealership is a request for new sign program to allow new signage at the dealership. And there's also a request for a sign exception to allow the existing freestanding pylon sign to be replaced in height which exceeds the maximum height allowed. Do we have a staff report.
Thank you, Acting Chair Paul and board members. This is this, as mentioned, this is Subaru dealership. It's at the corner of Harbor Street and Francisco Boulevard East, right in the middle of Francisco Boulevard East, essentially. Immediately to the west is the San Rafael Yacht Harbor. The project does ask for a couple of things, one being a sign program, which would allow for basically additional signage, which would be essentially located at the interior or the parking lot facing signs. These are wall signs that would be facing both east and west. It also involves a sign exception to allow for a pylon sign. There's currently a pylon sign there, but now the pylon sign would be larger in size and taller. One thing that the board wanted to update on is that there was a prior design review permit that was approved last year for some new colors and materials for facades, and this will be where the new signs will be attached to, at least the wall signs. So that was something that was bifurcated from this particular project that, looking back, we probably shouldn't. It should have come to you as a formal, cohesive one project. I did want to also circulate, which will be important to you. I'm going to circulate the approved material and color boards for those facades, those new facades that you see in the color renderings. And then the one that's not been identified too much, these are the colors of the actual signs. You'll notice that there's some similarities with the grays, for instance. But so this is the sign colors, and these are the new facade building colors. I wanted to pass them around so you guys could get a greater idea of the relationship between what the signs will look like against these new facades, because they haven't been put up yet. And as I mentioned, previous design review permit approved them by staff of the facades when they should have probably been coming to you as one cohesive project. Staff's comments in general, as you will read from the staff report, is that the sign program findings of common design elements can be met. We believe that both the colors, the material, size, types of signs, and the location merit the approval of a sign program. However, there is a potential for sign clutter. These new interior or parking lot facing signs will be doing essentially the same feat as the pylon sign, the taller and larger pylon sign that they're asking. It will provide greater visibility for northbound and southbound, both Francisco Boulevard, but also for Highway 101. So in the face of that, planning's proposing either a reduction in the number of signs, meaning the reduction in either the size of these parking lot facing new wall signs, or the elimination of them altogether. The project also asks for a sign exception. This would allow, again, much larger, about double the size of what's allowed under the ordinance, and also taller by about 4 feet than what's allowed, maybe even 5 feet, 4.5 feet that's allowed under the sign code. In this case, staff had difficulty meeting the findings. One of the biggest findings to allow for a sign exception is what are the unique conditions or circumstances on the site itself. Staff couldn't find any. The building itself has a 0 setback, so it's the wall signs are right up against Francisco Boulevard, essentially, and is not a particularly large site. It's one of the smaller dealerships along Francisco Boulevard. So we had difficulty meeting the sign exception. However, if the board does find that the findings for the sign exception are there, we particularly ask that perhaps maybe the sign exception would just be applicable to maybe the height of the sign rather than the size. Generally speaking, freestanding pylon signs along Francisco Boulevards are all a similar size. They're about 50 square feet in size, which is the limit for most pylon signs along Francisco Boulevard. So this would give this Subaru dealership twice as size as the other dealerships in the neighborhood. Lastly, when staff was talking to you about the design review permit that was previously approved by staff last year, currently there's a landscape requirement on the site of 10%. There is no landscaping on the site whatsoever. Up till 1990, there was landscaping on the site. In fact, it was along Francisco Boulevard, but it had been removed in the last 30 years. project that came before the board about 5 years ago at the Toyota Pre-Owned was very similar to this, where they were asking for new facades. It's a much larger site, much larger building. They put on a number of signs. However, they did, with the board's recommendation, they provided a landscape strip along Francisco Boulevard. Staff believes this is a similar type of project, asking for the similar types of improvements. And we believe that maybe a narrow, a 2-foot wide by 80 feet wide landscape strip might be appropriate for this as well. So we would like the board to comment on staff's recommendation as well. That essentially completes staff's brief introduction to the project.
Does the board have any questions of staff? Don?
How does this pylon sign compare to the Lexus sign that we just approved here about a month and a half ago? If you remember, they brought in the original sign
Right.
that we thought was too large, and come to find out they had a smaller standard sign that we required them to use.
I apologize. I'm not ready to answer that because I just went into the Lexus sign. I just looked into what is approved, what's been approved there, and as of right, they're below 50 square feet in size. So I can't tell you how much bigger we approved it. Or you guys would you're saying that you looked at a new Lexus sign and you recommended approval of a larger?
We recommended that they went with the smaller.
Smaller one, excuse me.
Sign.
I apologize.
Yeah, they had a taller, they basically had their standard sizes.
Yeah.
So we approved the project with the smaller size.
So my question
For some
again,
reason, 17 feet tall is ringing a bell, but I don't remember.
I know it's not.
The limitation
not
is,
that high.
in that
I
area, the
guarantee you.
limitation is 21 feet and 50 square feet in size. So most of the pylons, if not all, except for the Toyota Pre-Owned, all meet that. They all comply with that. In this case, the current sign complies. Actually, it does not comply. The current size complies in height, but it doesn't comply in size. It is approximately 75 square feet. How that happened, I'm not sure, but they exceed the 50 square feet that's allowed for the site.
Any other questions of staff?
Yeah, my first question, Steve, is there a reason why this room keeps getting colder and colder as the night goes on?
Yeah,
This is the second
pretty
meeting in a row
consistent.
this has happened.
You're out of order, Jeff.
and the boom box outside
That was
keeps
not
getting louder and
agendized.
louder.
I have
I can do something about the boom box. I can't do anything about currently about the heat, so I will notify those folks that
Okay.
do have something.
And then I actually have some questions on the project. When you say 80 feet, 2-foot strip is, and I didn't measure, is that the entire length of the property
It-
with the exception of the driveway entrances? Or-
It's not. It's only the area
That
between
center
the
area?
driveways. That's all. It's not the ones that would be in front of the buildings currently that, if you see them, they almost have display vehicles that are
Right.
parked in front of it. That would be in addition to.
So the other question I had is the city's built that new bridge, and there's
Yep.
a desire to make East Francisco more pedestrian-friendly.
Right,
But when you walk that street, it's only a 4-foot sidewalk.
right,
You have light standards within the sidewalk.
right.
You have a street tree. You have a fire hydrant. So it effectively makes that sidewalk about 2 feet wide,
Mm-hmm.
which obviously isn't even ADA accessible.
Right.
So as projects come before us, can we improve sidewalks so that at some point you can actually get a wheelchair down East Francisco?
Well,
Because part of the reason why I ask is if you put in that
Right.
landscape strip, you've kind of memorialized that substandard sidewalk to a certain
Right.
extent.
I do have some difficulty even meeting the Lexus standard, being able to connect sidewalk replacement for this project. I think that would be outside of the purview or the ability for the board to ask for, but
But even not even widening sidewalks where there's light standards and other impediments?
well, that would be something that I would want to include the Department of Public Works in as well, just because the sidewalk is their domain, and so I would want to, include them in any sort of discussion regarding that. But there is a plan that's been adopted for widening all the sidewalks along Francisco Boulevard. I think at the board to jump in there and now to also jump in there, I'm a little cautious. I would say that maybe we should allow the plan to be fully integrated itself before we start site-specific requiring widening of sidewalks.
Yeah, my concern would be is you require an improvement there that's only, it's not going to be there in the final analysis.
That would be taken away,
Right?
yeah.
So I misunderstood. The 2-foot section is taken out of the right-of-way, the city's right-of-way?
I believe, if I understand it right, the buildings are actually the property line. So where the display vehicles are in front of the buildings are actually, it's in the right-of-way. Sidewalks the right-of-way. Some of the parking of the vehicles right now are currently a little bit over the right-of-way.
That can't be, can it?
Because that was drawn in line with the Toyota pre-owns as well. That's how it worked out. The Toyota pre-owns, again, the building is right on the front property line. And I believe that these buildings are also directly on the front property line. So anything between the buildings and the curb would all be in the right-of-way.
What is that, they seem to show a property line, though, that's far out on the site plan. Is that just incorrect, or on the front sheet? They have a dashed line that's basically shows about, what, a 4
Yeah.
or 5 foot off of the curb?
Yeah, I'm not sure how accurate that is. I think the applicants here, that they can maybe provide some ideas of what that's about.
All right. Any other questions of staff? I had a question. If there's a plan to widen the sidewalk on Francisco, would it be taken out of one of the traffic lanes? In other words, make the traffic lanes narrower?
I believe it's going to be widening both along the street in the right-of-way, but then also I think it's going to be widening or taking advantage of the right-of-way that's been basically used privately by a lot of these developments. A lot of the private sites have been using some of the right-of-way. They've kind of captured them over the years. So I think it's almost recapturing those areas. I wish I had more to share with the board so that we would be able to really dive into this thing. And perhaps maybe this is premature to be asking for more information regarding the landscaping. Maybe it's a great idea. Somehow we were able to get it on the Toyota pre-owned, and maybe staff would need to do some additional research to condition this to require it as well.
Any other questions? You said there was landscaping previously, but it was taken away.
Somehow disappeared. It was there up till about 1990, and there would be landscaping in front of the buildings, and yeah, there was landscaping similar to what's in front of the Toyota pre-owned. Somehow it disappeared over the last 30 years.
Somehow. Okay. Any other questions? Don't. Is the applicant here to make a presentation? Would you come up and make a brief presentation of what you're proposing?
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Ford. I'm acting on behalf of the sign company, and I'm the applicant. I don't have a lot to add to Steve's presentation, other than to say what we proposed here, I think, is primarily the standard Subaru branding, freestanding sign, and then the wall signage. This site's a little different in others that I've done in the fact that there are 2 buildings on this property, which is why there's, they basically have shown signs on the smaller building on 2 elevations and on the larger one on 3. Certainly be willing to, happy to listen to, Commission's feedback on the amount of signage, whether some of that is redundant, as well as the size of the freestanding sign, which again it's pretty much the standard Subaru size.
Okay. Any questions of the applicant from the board?
So the pylon sign, the size of that's already sitting in a warehouse someplace? That's just standard size?
It's a standard size. I don't know what the other, what the next level down is. Obviously, the height is something that's flexible. You can cut the pole down. As far as the actual head of the sign, though, that's pretty much the standard.
So when you say a level down, that doesn't mean there's a smaller pylon sign someplace?
There probably is. I don't know what that dimension would be. So in other words, if you said, it had to be 50 square feet, I don't know if the next size, it would be right at 50, or it might be 48 square feet or 44. I don't know what the standard sizes are, because there's a certain ratio, obviously height to width, and then the orientation of the logo and so forth. There's spacing around it and things like that. So basically, you'd have to take that existing sign and shrink it down. You couldn't really modify that cabinet so much. So again, if you said this is the maximum size we want to see, we would come up with a sign that's a standard that's within that requirement.
Okay, thanks.
Sure.
Can I ask a question about the pylon sign placement? What is it trying to do? Like,
Well, that's the, I believe that's the location of the current freestanding sign. So that was basically going to replace it in the same location. Obviously, the main purpose of that sign is to get people on the freeway that go by on there. And that's kind of the height, the reason for the height. I don't, other than that, I don't know where else. I guess it could be put at the other entrance to it, but obviously where the buildings are located, there's not really any room to put it in front of either of those buildings. I think really the primary driving factor in that is that's where the current sign, I think, was located.
okay, yeah, it's confusing because it's half covered up by the building from one elevation, and then
yeah.
in the other, it's turned the wrong way.
I know,
So
yeah. So again, yeah, that's the placement. I think that was the other thing is, coming along Francisco Boulevard, I guess that's probably westbound, coming from, bottom to the top there, you wouldn't, if the sign is the same height as the building, you're really not going to see it on the street. But then again, you've got signs on the building, which is really more for that. So I think the primary purpose of that sign is for the freeway and to get visibility on there. Okay, sure.
Is there anyone from the public that wishes to speak on
Oh, thanks, David.
Ed Rossi, property owner. And with regard to the building being up to the street, I don't think that's correct. The buildings are set back from the street. And with regard to the sign, my grandfather built down there in 1960, I think. We moved back into there in 92 with Mazda only. And so it's a Mazda sign that's covered up awaiting approval because we sold Mazda 3 years ago to do this. And I believe that sign is not 75 feet. If it was, it got approved in 1992, which I don't think would have happened. So I think, and with regard to landscaping, when I read the staff report last Thursday or Friday when it came out, there's no mention. That's the first we've heard of landscaping. And having grown up with that building, I personally don't recall landscaping. The trees were put in by the city. And the whole sidewalk is supposed to be, the whole street, I guess, is going to be redone down the road. So to your point about landscaping now towards whatever's going to happen with the city widening the street doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but that's what I know about the building and the signs. Thanks.
Wait, hold on a second. We have a question?
So when I was on site today, if you look at this drawing here, and there's that northern building, and you have the 3 cars parked in front of it, there's actually, there's been a sidewalk added there, and there's a ramp that sticks out into the driveway. Is there going to be any changes to the circulation on that site, since it's already?
Talking the harbor corner
No,
towards the
no,
yacht
on the north
harbor.
end, north end.
North end.
So if you look at your drawing, the smaller showroom on the north end has 3 cars parked in front of it. You've added maybe about a 2.5, 3 foot sidewalk in front of that building. There's a ramp there that's been added to get cars into that showroom, which now sticks out into the driveway. I'm just curious to know if there's going to be changes to the circulation at all based on that? Because it's a real tight site to try to drive around already.
It is. That was ADA compliance, and at this point, we're not going to probably be able to park cars where we used to
Right.
against the building.
So is that going to change your driveway at all?
Apparently, I think in discussions with the city on doing the street, there will be a change to the driveway, the size or location. My architect is here conveniently.
I can answer the
Well, I was just curious about that, because
Yeah, I
I
think
did
that-
try to drive through there,
I
and it
think
was
there's
really
a-
tough.
The driveway is going to be moved to the east? Oh, where the little showroom is? Oh, the entrance, is it? Okay. Narrower, okay,
Just going to get a little tighter. Okay.
thank you.
I had a question. You're the property owner, do you know where the property line, front property line is?
We believe it's where the sidewalk, right there, it's up to the side.
On the drawing,
Yeah, where, the sidewalk is the city's and,
about 4 feet from the, 4 or 5 feet from the curb?
8 feet.
8 feet, okay. And, you've owned it since 1990?
No, my grandfather moved down there in 1960, I believe. Yeah,
But, you said that you don't recall any landscaping there.
no, no.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members of the public wish to speak? All right, we'll close the public comment section and turn it back to the board for comments. Sarah, would you like to start?
So I think as far as the colors, I have no issue. I like the gray and blue. You guys are all branded, so that's pretty straightforward. I haven't heard any kind of compelling reason to make the sign, the pylon sign, larger than the standard. I think if it was cited, because you do have some room within your property line to cite it closer to Francisco, you might have better visibility without making it bigger. Even if it's a couple feet, it would pull it out a little bit. And then in terms of the sign of the size of the signage on the building, the elevation along Francisco, you have the same size sign on the large building and the small building. And then when you look at the Harbor Street elevation, you have a smaller sign on the large building on this side. And I feel like there's no hierarchy on the signage along Francisco, that you could use that same smaller sign on the smaller building, and it would actually look more appropriate to the scale of that building, because it's taking up that entire, fascia piece on the little building, whereas the smaller one, I think, would be closer to, more consistent with the scale of that building, and I think that would be for both sides of the small building. Let's see. And I think that's it.
Stuart?
Yeah, I agree with what, I don't find any compelling reason on the pylon sign why it's can't stay consistent with what we've approved before, what all the other signs are up and down Auto Row, and staying with the standards, so I'm in full agreement there. Just counting signs, I mean, I don't know, I know we have 2 buildings, but we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 signs that say Subaru. I mean, I think we got it. It's a Subaru dealership. So I'm thinking that we probably don't need that many identifiers, that particularly with the presence of at the middle of the site or somewhat middle of the site of the pylon sign that says Subaru. I think that's going to tell us the entire site's a Subaru dealer. It makes sense for the little building, the orphaned building, to have one. It makes sense to have the pylon at an appropriate scale. Maybe the main building doesn't need 3 Subaru signs on it. And then it's a little busy. Service is service. I'm not sure what express is. I should have asked that question when the applicant was up, but it's a little late for that. So I don't know. Service is obvious to me, that if I'm getting my car serviced, whether it's express or not, we're not going to a Jiffy Lube. I would think that the express is probably superfluous. Other than that, the colors, the branding, it's all great. I just think we have too many Subarus and a pylon that's too tall. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Jeff?
Yeah, I agree with the sign comments I've heard so far. And, we've required all the dealers that have come before us to have at least some landscaping. But, my personal dilemma is that, the sidewalk, something needs to happen with the sidewalk. I mean, it's not even ADA accessible to get down Francisco. So whatever landscaping done, that something has to, has to be coordinated with whatever the sidewalk improvements are, and we don't know what those are. I think it'd be pretty silly to put in all that landscaping and just remove it again in the near future because of the sidewalk improvements. So I'd like to see landscaping there, but I don't know what the answer is because of the sidewalk situation. So those are my comments.
Don?
I pretty much agree with everything we've heard tonight. I have two concerns. One, the pylon sign, I think it has to be reduced and stay in line with what we've asked all the other dealerships to do. And this whole notion of taking 2 feet out of the sidewalk, I think is a bad one. It seems like there's plenty of area here where a lot of these cars are parked where we can't introduce landscaping. Now, whether it was there at one time or not, I don't know. But I don't know why we can't add landscaping. It reduces your storage ability out there. But I think it would benefit the dealership if you were to landscape the front of this property. But I certainly wouldn't suggest or even think about putting it on the public side of the property line. So I guess I'm asking that would be on you.
That's it. Thank you. I would also agree that the monument sign, the pylon sign, should be consistent with the rest of the dealerships that we've approved, and so that the height doesn't need to be any larger than it already is. It could actually even be smaller, and the size as well. I also noted that they're asking for 348 square feet of signage, and that would be the second largest about all these approved sign programs, and I don't think it's warranted. So I think, like some of the other board members have said, there's just too many Subaru signs. I think we could take the one off of Harbor, on the Harbor Street elevation, and the one on the main building right side elevation, because the going east and west on Francisco Boulevard, they'll see the pylon sign because that's oriented to east and west, and then on the freeway they can see the signs that are oriented to the freeway as well on the buildings. So I think they could reduce the number of signs. That would bring the square footage down, I think, substantially to probably somewhere around 250 square feet, something like that. I would go for, well, I guess I would like to see some landscaping along the front, and I think it's a good idea as far as what was mentioned as far putting some landscaping in the parking areas as well, even if it means reducing some of the car storage. It would be helpful, though, to see exactly where the property line is. If the applicant is correct that the property line is 8 feet from the curb, then there's an 8-foot public right-of-way, which is plenty for some kind of landscaping in the public right-of-way and still a 5-foot wide sidewalk for ADA access. So then a 2-foot strip on the applicant's property, I think, would work. And that would really dress up Francisco Boulevard and would also dress up this dealership, because they're going through this this remodeling effort to make it a much more attractive site. I think landscaping really would help a lot. So I think would be helpful to actually know, have the exact property line dimensions to see where we are, and also would help to see what the city is ultimately going to do. But even in that respect, it may be a while before the city actually does something, because it's going to be an expensive proposition, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of consternation, because when they tear up Francisco Boulevard, that's going to affect a lot of people. So it might be years in the future, and in the meantime, we could get some landscaping right now. So I would vote for landscaping as recommended by staff.
Yeah, one other quick comment too. Along the front of the property, you have the steel post and the chain that goes across the front. I don't think that's a real visual exit. So if there could be some landscaping in there, I would also encourage you to remove that also, in addition.
I'd like to add a little bit more. Something we didn't talk about tonight because we got stuck on the signs is illumination. I know this board in past projects has been concerned with the brightness of them. We've required a lighting review later after installation and also asked for the fixtures to ensure that they were dimmable in the event they were too bright. So I don't see any data here about how bright. I don't know if we've set a standard on that. I know we've kind of pointed at a lot of other dealerships in the past and kind of said, make it like that in terms of brightness. Little hit and miss there. You know, we ended up with a Toyota light wall, which we all regret. So I would ask, you know, or see if there's any support for a lighting review later and ask that whatever fixtures they select are adjustable in case we find it too bright. They've got 6500K white LEDs. That's like beyond daylight backlighting this thing, so we don't want it to be the brightest beacon along Auto Row. If anyone else agrees.
I would agree. Any other comments from the board?
Just one. I mean, I think the idea of landscaping is nice, but it's challenging for me to support requiring it to be added if it's not actually required by the city. So I think it's a nice to have, but if it's not required, then I wouldn't feel comfortable requiring it.
There is a requirement, correct?
It's a 10% requirement, and there's none.
And there's zero.
But does this project trigger it meeting that?
That's where the board lies, is that, is there a nexus? The reason why I brought up the previous design review permit, because this project would have come as a much larger project if it wasn't bifurcated. It was bifurcated, and the new facades were approved by staff last year, and now the signs are here. If they were together, the question is, if this project was one harmonious project, would it rise to the threshold that it would require maybe some landscaping for the site? Staff believes if we're treating this project similar to the one that's the Lexus pre-owned, the answer would be yes. But if not, then, I mean, it's really up to the board to decide, have we hit that tipping point or not?
Does DPW already have a sidewalk plan for that area? Has that been designed and not implemented?
Yeah, the plan did involve some sidewalk, and I tried to look at the one specifically in front of this particular site. Most of it is quite frankly going to meet the ADAs. All the ADs, they have to have all the ADA corners and stuff like that. But as far as how it affects this site, I have difficulty understanding it, frankly. So I can't tell you a lot on it.
So has it been designed enough that could be seen in this project, the landscaping?
The design has only
could be
been
coordinated with this
the design
plan?
has only been brought to the point to allow for bids. So it's defined the scope of the project, but it's not been to the actual design of the frontages. Only that they should include ADA, corners. It should involve, but there isn't a lot of detail, and it doesn't say it, that it's going to have 8 feet of sidewalk and 4 feet of landscaping. It's not that detailed.
How can they bid it then?
I think it had to do mostly with just the ADA corners, all the number of corners that they had to do throughout the whole thing.
So maybe this is like a phase project. And
Might
the
very well
first
be.
phase is just the ADA accessible corners. and-
The canal access plan that we did about 4 years ago, I
Yes.
sat on, I think we had criteria for all the sidewalks. That's how the bridge was proposed. It might be good to go back and look at that
Okay, we'll do that.
document. I can't remember if we were specific enough to have the widths of sidewalks, but it showed the direction and what was required and
Okay.
the access points.
I mean, to our landscape architects up here, I mean,
If you did
It's
the
2 feet,
corners,
it's 2
you'd get a wheelchair up there, then they get part of the way down the sidewalk,
go
and then
nowhere.
they get trapped.
but is 2 feet of landscaping really meaningful, guys? I mean, 2 feet. 5 feet would be. I mean, yeah, 2 feet, it's less than this desk. So if the recommendation is to give us 24 inches of landscaping, to me, just aesthetically speaking, I'm like, well, what is that? A place where garbage is going to collect? I mean, I don't know.
We ought to have 4 or 5 feet.
Well, of course. There you go. That
get
could be
up to
part of the
10%.
sidewalk widening project,
About
is
if
to
we-
get a real landscape buffer, but 2 feet's so anemic, I don't know if it's worth even
Compromise
planning.
at 3 feet. Would 3 feet be enough?
If it adds up to 10% of the square footage of the site, yeah.
Or if not, then, well, you also brought up the idea of planting strips in the parking area as well, on the interior, which I think is a good idea, and it would make this a much more attractive site.
I agree, and I don't think we've ever taken the approach, since it's difficult, we won't require it.
No,
Thank you.
no.
I didn't think about that, but thank you.
Well, do we have consensus on the landscaping or not?
I think we do, as a matter of fact. Why don't I tackle these consensus items right now? So let's start with the positive. The positives were that there was support for the new signs, the new sign colors. Excuse me. The board would like to have the pylon sign be consistent with the other pylon signs for the other dealerships in the surrounding area. Essentially, that would cap the square footage at 50 square feet and also the height at 21 feet. Another item was that there was a belief that there was too many Subaru signs and that a few could be taken off. There were redundancies involved, especially when given the close proximity with the pylon sign. There were some areas that were suggested for that they could be removed. One would have been I think the north, one on the harbor elevation, one on the north-facing parking lot sign. Maybe we don't want to get that specific, but that's what I heard from two of the board members. Another item was that explore providing site landscaping, some site landscaping, providing some landscape character on the site. That's the best way I could explain it. There were a lot of distinction between how much, where, and all this sort of stuff, but possibly it might be best said that the applicant should explore providing some on-site parking and landscaping, excuse me. And then there was a comment regarding lighting. And I wanted to make sure that everyone knew whenever there's any lighting involved in a project, there's always a 90-day lighting review period as a condition of approval. It's pretty standard. And it allows the staff, whenever lighting intensity is too bright or when it needs to be shielded, it allows us within 90 days of building final, for us to initiate more compliance with off-site glare. So if that will be fine with the board, then we'll just continue to keep that as a condition of approval, the illumination, the lighting review period. So,
But the comment was made to have it adjustable. Is that part of that?
no, I didn't hear that at all.
Well, I think though what we should say is adjustable only because the sign company needs to know that because of the 90-day review period, if it's too bright, they need to somehow be able to turn it down. And they're not going to rebuild the signs or the lighting, so it should be some kind of adjustable lighting.
Some kind of dimmer on the lighting.
Okay.
And the other comment I have is, could you verify the height of the other signs, the Lexus sign that we just approved?
They're all going to be shorter than what's here currently. The only pylon sign, if you will, that's taller than anything would be, again, the Lexus Toyota Pre-Owned, which is really the clock tower, basically, and that's acts as a pylon sign, if you will. But all the other freestanding pylon signs are all actually smaller than 20 feet.
Can we also get verification of the property line?
That'll be challenging. I mean, the applicant feels one way and staff felt the other, and without a survey, I mean, we can do our best guess and we can get a little more information, I guess. Yeah.
So then I'm confused.
We don't have a survey?
There's no survey for this. I mean, they're not moving a building or designing a new building. It's just that they're showing what they believe is the site property boundaries. Staff believes otherwise. That's all.
Pardon me?
I don't know if it's that.
It should. I'm a little confused, though.
Sure.
You're saying that the other auto dealerships have lower than 20 feet for their pylon signs?
Along Francisco Boulevard, with the exception of the Toyota Pre-Owned, the clock tower.
And this existing sign is 21 feet.
Correct. It would be one of the tallest, if not the tallest currently.
And so are we in agreement that we are going to allow that as kind of being a grandfathered height, or do we want it to bring it down to match the other dealerships.
I was saying it should be comparable to all the other dealerships. We made them reduce their.
Well, comparable or similar? I mean, if the other dealerships are 16 feet?
16, 17 maybe?
16, 17, so is that what the intention was, or? They're presently 21 feet, they were asking for 25, and we're saying that it should be more comparable or similar to the other dealerships, or is 21 feet acceptable?
Is 21 feet allowable without an exception?
Correct.
Then
Maximum
I'm
of 21
comfortable with
feet
that.
and 50 square feet in size. That's, the sign code allows it.
Then I think that's reasonable.
I would say that's the minimum myself, or
Okay.
what a maximum, whatever you.
I
And
just
the only
wanted
one that's
clarification.
higher, you're right, was a component of the building.
Correct.
And actually, a lot of us tried to get that one.
Right.
If we're being consistent as a board, we allowed that to stay at its height, and since this
It-
one's conforming, we're not terribly compelled
No.
to make them go even below the ordinance.
Okay,
Got it.
Would you like me to go through those real quick, the consensus items, or is that
I
pretty?
think
we got
we got it, yeah.
Okay.
I guess the question is, do we need to continue this item for them to come back with a landscaping plan?
If you feel this is important enough, you could have it come back. You can have it come back as a consensus item. You could have it work through staff. Staff has frequently worked with one or two board members here if I need help with the landscape aspects of it. So,
What do y'all think?
I'll work with you.
Jeff?
I'll work with Steve.
Jeff said he would work with, if we require the landscape to just to come through staff and in consultation with Jeff.
Agree.
Agreed,
Is that good?
Okay.
Would someone like to make a motion then?
You're working with Steve, you better make the motion.
You should make the motion. I'll make it. I move that we approve the project tonight under the conditions outlined by staff, that they work with staff and our volunteer board member for landscaping issues.
Second.
I'll second.
Okay, is there any further discussion on the motion?
Could I get clarification on that second? You guys were instantaneously on both of them. Which
Jeff
was the
can have
second?
it, or Don.
Don's having it? Okay, thank you.
Flip a coin.
Any other discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
What?
I was gonna be perverse and vote no.
I guess that concludes the